Child busy living sober, busy living sober, busy living sober with LL Kirchner, the author of Blissful Thinking. Hi, LL. How are you?
Hi, Busy. I'm great, especially now that I'm here and I had you sing to me.
I know, isn't that fun? That's what my little one day I want to have like somebody professional like sing it instead of me because I just have this crazy voice. But I am so excited to share your story of experience, strength, and hope. What it's been like to be sober, to relapse, to get sober, to move a lot of times because we have these geographics in our head. It's going to make it better. The only problem is if we bring ourselves with us, don't we?
Um, Busy, can I say how great it is to talk to someone who just gets it?
Yes.
You talk to a lot of people when you put a book out, and for a lot of them, it's not natural to think about things in this way. It's a very specific way of looking at things, and it's just that relief. It's that whole sinking ship.
Yeah, I've got to change something. I've got to change something. And this thing inside of me is just too big. I can't even go there. Let's
Mm.
get buy a plane ticket. That looks
Yeah.
like a sexy place to go, right?
Yeah.
So we were talking before we started recording about your first book
Mm.
and your first book about living in the Middle East and the ending of a marriage, which you
Mm.
did touch on in at the beginning of the Blissful Thinking as well,
Yeah.
which I found really interesting in that you were in Qatar and he kind of
Mhm.
was like, he didn't even give you the chance to say, wait, let's meet with let's call a therapist. Let's work on
No.
something. He was like,
No.
I'm out. Bye.
No. Well, the scene, I mean, in my first book, or maybe I put it in this one too. I don't think so though, because I really didn't go into it. But I mean, my response when he told me that over the phone was, "Well, couldn't we at least try,
You
um, you
mentioned
know,
that in the book. Yeah.
yeah, couldn't we try counseling, maybe fighting
Yeah.
something?" It was so weird. He just left, and that was very, very hard for me to deal with. And I listened to so many wise women like Pema Chodron and Carolyn Mace. Like I went all ends of, I went everywhere in search of spiritual healing from that rift because it was really difficult for me to handle. And ultimately, I really realized that I had believed that this marriage was proof that I had finally recovered from the first round of sobriety and not even the first round of sobriety, but the first heartbreak in sobriety when my boyfriend died and I had relapsed.
Mhm.
And it was sort of, I don't know who I thought I was proving. You know how we get these ideas in our head like, well, this will show them. Who's them? Who are we showing these things to?
But it really, we feel like for some reason, and I don't know if this is women or men. Because I can't talk for what it's like to be a man. I have no idea. And I don't
Right.
want to, again, talk for the whole universe of women. But when somebody walks away from us and doesn't give us an excuse, at least for me, this is me personally, and it sounds like maybe a little bit like you, but we make it all about us. It's like, I am the failed person. I have got something really wrong with me. Instead of looking at the person like, okay, loser. Bye. You know,
See you later.
see you later. Lose
But
my
but
number.
but I also think that in some sense, and this is, our addictive minds, right? But in some sense, that is how we are trained to look at things in recovery. What did I do wrong that brought this situation on? And there is a healthy way of doing that, and there is an unhealthy way of doing that. And, where I went to with this book, I mean, at heart, it was trying to have smart feet. I was trying to move in the direction of recovery as opposed to in the direction of my addiction, but I still managed to get addictive with it. I was just obsessed and consumed with that question that you just put out there, which is like, what's wrong with me? And how can I get rid of it so I never have to feel this pain again?
And there's so many of us out there that I think are walking around, and I think addicts and not even addicts, especially today, are walking around going, what is going on? How did I get to this place? There's so much darkness. So
Hmm.
let's go back to the very beginning, though, prior to all these men and everything else. So
Yeah.
you grew up in,
I moved a lot growing up. I
Yeah.
learned how to be in a geographic cure from birth, pretty much. I mean, by the time I was 12, we had moved 9 times.
That's right.
Um, it was not anything super tragic. We were just sort of circling the declining Rust Belt along with my dad's industry, right? He was in steel. And when he was about 40, he ditched his corporate job and bought a health club of all things, which I just was so weird to me. um, you know, who does that? Like I had no context for that. Neither did anybody else in my family. Like he basically just came home and was like, "Hey, guess what I just did?" And we're like, "What?" We thought he was going to tell us that we were moving again, and no, he was telling us that he had bought a health club and that we were not moving. And he actually ended up staying in that house. And he passed away in 2021, and he was still in that house.
But isn't that that's a big change though, going from a briefcase to a gym bag. You're like, wait a minute, you're supposed to be all tidied up and pretty when you walk out the door, Dad, not wearing sweaty sweat clothes and looking.
I was more horrified by the change in my mother because she always was dressed and she had, fabulous hats and lipstick and leopard print. And then suddenly she's like schlubbing around in oversized gym t-shirts and tennis shoes. I was like, who are you? And what have you done with my mother? Where are our matching Easter hats? It was a huge change. And I hear about a lot of entrepreneurial families where everybody sort of pulled together and we've all got to make this work. And it didn't feel that way in my family. It felt more like we were just all trying to not, I don't know, kill each other. I was, on the one hand, I could say I felt betrayed by that because you think you're going to have this one kind of life. Like we're going to go to the pool in the summer. And then in high school, I'll get new clothes and then I'll go to college. And suddenly it was like, nope, we got to get rid of that pool membership. We don't have any money. There's government cheese in the fridge. And if you want to buy clothes, you're on your own, kid. Good luck. And oh, are you planning on going to school? Let me know. It was like that. And so, it was not, I did not feel a sense of like, we're all in this together. Let's pull and make it happen. It was more like Lord of the Flies, like everybody for yourself.
That must have been a huge change.
Yes, it was very, I mean, it was a lot harder than say like the year we moved from Michigan. We did the reverse underground railroad from Michigan to Alabama. And that was very shocking. I went into the special education classes because I couldn't understand what anybody was saying. They'd come up and they'd be like, "How's your momonym?" And I'd be like, "What's a momonym?" Like I was thinking of it as spelled like MAMANIMH, and I was like, "What is that?" And it was, "How's your mom and them?" I didn't know. Or it's a spelling test. It's like, "All right, class, pen, pen." Pen. And I'd be like, "Is that pen, pan, or pin?" And I would guess wrong. And they were like, "This girl is slow. Let's move her over." So that was interesting as well.
So it was a lot of self-esteem stuff for the beginning. And so then you had your first drink and a cigarette.
Oh, it was before then. I mean, somehow I just instinctively knew. Like I would watch those women on black and white movies with my mom, and they'd be like knocking back whiskeys and smoking, and they looked so glamorous, and they always had the right thing to say, and they were just like, "Hey," and I just wanted to be that. I wanted to be an adult. This sort of concept of adulting that we have today. I don't know if you ever feel this way, Busy, but I'm like, I couldn't wait to be adulting because kidding was terrible. Like, I couldn't drive, I couldn't make any decisions, I couldn't go anywhere. Of course, now I guess maybe it's different too because kids are a lot more involved in family decision making. I mean, I cannot imagine my mother taking me into the grocery store and being like, "Now, what would you like for dinner? Are you kidding me?" And it was like, "You're going to be happy with what I give you and shut up."
It's so funny you're
And go
saying
get
that.
my pack of cigarettes.
Exactly. If you're gonna, I mean, I started smoking. My dad left his Vantage sitting outside by. They
Oh,
were in the TV
Vantage.
Vantage, which is the big bullseye,
Yeah.
and he left the Vantage there, and I started smoking at 13. And and drinking, I had the same idea. I was like, when my mom and dad are at their cocktail parties in their pretty dresses, they're so happy. I cannot
Yes.
wait to be one of them.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then wasn't it like the first time, for me anyway, the first time I drank, I was like, this is what I've been missing my whole life. I
exactly.
mean, and then
Exactly.
I just chased that as often as I could possibly get it. And I was 10.
I
I
was
started
13.
babysitting.
Yeah.
That's how I did it. How did you do it when you were that age?
I
Although
was
by the time I was 13, the other kids were starting to party too. So there were parties I could go to. But by then, I already needed to have somebody go get me a fifth Southern Comfort for some reason. And I would drink before I would go out and meet other people because I was like, I'm not leaving it up to chance at this party.
See, I would we would have parties and I'd get
Hmm.
drunk and I'd love it. And I'd keep
Hmm.
having parties. And then my parents had this tumultuous divorce. And my
Mm.
dad, I was just actually telling somebody this. My dad, I stayed with my dad, my siblings and my mother went somewhere else. And I was with my dad only in this larger house and da da
Yeah.
da da, all the bing bangs and whistles. And he would put a line on his vodka, which of course I never saw. And he's like, Are you kidding me? You guys were drank all my vodka. Cause you know how I know? Because you filled it up over the line that I had marked on there. And I was like, Oh, you guys, we totally screwed up. But it was the
Did
answer
you
to
ever steam open the bottles?
no.
Oh yeah, I did that. I would steam open the bottles. And then I would
And
put
then,
water back in them.
and did you go? And so this is part of your story I didn't hear. I don't remember reading if I did. So you start drinking at 10.
Mhm.
And did you end up going to college? You did.
I did. It was in college that I got sober. And funny, like this was
Well,
in
that's like
1986.
okay, 1980. So I graduated high school in 1987. But back then, not
Mhm.
only was it really unheard of for women to get sober, but to get sober at that age because you were
Not
a
in
problem.
Columbus, Ohio.
It
No,
wasn't.
seriously. There were okay, this is what happened for me. All these people around this is so funny. All these people around me started getting sober and I was dating this one guy in a band. His name was Casey. I had a big old crush on him. And I think he may have been California sober at the time. I actually haven't thought about this in a long time. I don't remember if he was smoking pot or not, but we were smoking pot in my room and he was telling me some BS about, hey, we got to get sober. And I was like, you're projecting. I've never forgotten that like sound moment. A lot of memories for me are very visual. That's a very sound memory. I can still hear myself croaking it out. And even part of me was like, that might be. but I don't remember. I think that was before I had the ulcer. I ended up with a bleeding ulcer, and that really puts a cramp on your drinking. And then you end up in a mental institution, or oh, maybe I did, and then again in a mental institution. And then you think, oh my gosh, I'm either going to end up in a mental institution or a hospital if I don't do something differently. And like I said, all these people I knew were sober. I remember I was a waitress at the Ground Round. Do you remember those
Oh,
places with
yes, of course, of
the
course, of
peanuts on the
course,
floor?
of course. Yeah.
I got fired. I couldn't even handle that job. And this guy, Pete, he had this little pocket-sized big book, one of these. I have one right here. Is this it? No, that's not it. But it's like this
I know.
size, right? You
There's
know what I'm
probably
talking
one.
about.
Yeah, there's one in this house somewhere too.
He had it in his like his little waiter pocket thing, and
And
he
his
pulls it
apron.
out.
Yeah, and his apron.
His apron, yeah. And he pulls it out and he's like, this is what I do. I go to meetings and and he's the one who actually took me to my first meeting, but it was lots of people around me. And there was a big young people's community in Columbus, Ohio. I don't know
Which
if
is
that's
like,
because,
is that crazy in 1986? Because when I my siblings got sober way before I did. Unfortunately, they're not sober today. But
oh, I'm
I know
sorry.
it's
That's
really
hard. That is
it's
hard.
oh, it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. It's hard. It's really hard.
Especially if they were sober before. I mean, I applaud you first. I've had friends who have gone back out and it really messes with my mind. Or it used to. It doesn't anymore, but when I was younger, especially, I would be
Yeah,
like,
I
"Wait a
mean,
minute."
I have 17 plus years now, so I
Yay.
thank you. So I am, I've had to set my boundaries and do my stuff, which isn't probably what a lot of people might have done, but for me, it works. It's
Mm,
sad. It's sad because I don't see them or talk to them, but I always send them light and wish them the best. But getting sober at a young age today, it's very hip. It's very in to be sober in your,
Yes.
getting sober in your early 20s and late teens. There's a lot more people doing it, even though fentanyl's killing more kids than ever before. And so you go and you get sober and you stay sober for how long?
Let's see, I was 19 when I first got sober, and I stayed sober for 7.5 years. And I always, like I would never say 7 years, because when you have 0 days, 6 months is a long time. So 7.5 years. And uh, I joined the Peace Corps. So my boyfriend had drowned, and I was bereft. I was just so he was a huge part of my early sobriety, even though I waited to get with him. Like, I don't remember if I had done my first fifth step or not, because I was very eager to get on and start doing my steps right away from the beginning, because I was like, I can see how these people seem to stay sober by doing these things called steps. And I really was desperate to stay sober. It was like I went from blah, 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 you have to get sober, don't tell me, what you say sticks to you, not to me, that kind of thing. And to suddenly like, oh my gosh, this is what I have to do. And so I was really keen to get on with the steps. And I probably had done my fifth step when I started, and then I started dating him. So, but I didn't have a lot of time sober. I had less than 6 months, more than 3, less than 6. I remember that because I was at his house when a friend of ours called to say she had relapsed, and was just around celebrating my 6 month mark, and I was at his house. So, anyway, when he died, I was so we were just, I never thought of us as an AA couple, but I think that's what we were. Really, we were one of those people. We ran this Monday night meeting at this big church in Columbus, and we knew all the same people. And I just felt really the air came out of the whole thing. And I of course I wasn't going to use, and I was really determined that I would stay sober. And if I keep doing what I did, I'll get what I got. Literally, I could pervert give me any AA slogan, I can pervert it, right? I can turn it wrong. And so when I relapsed, I stayed out for a good 2.5 years, somewhere around there. That's a little tough for me to remember, because when I came back in, it was May of 1996. And at that point, I was not going to get sober again. I just needed to like clear the cobwebs. Like I needed to like straighten up. So honestly, when people come in and they say like, "Oh, I'm just here to lose weight," I'm like, "Well, sit next to me." You know what I mean? You want to get your boyfriend back? Sit here. Let's talk about that. Like, I don't care what reason you're here. Judge sent you, terrific. And it all makes a difference. Pretty recently, I had someone tell me, like, 20 odd years later, that they came to Jeff's memorial when he died. And that was what he wasn't sober at that time, but that was what planted the seed. And I was just amazed by that.
Isn't that crazy how we affect people in our lives? Like, how could it be that you decide to get sober in Columbus, Ohio, where there's a lot of young people that are getting sober? Like, I don't think there's anything called the coincidence. I
I
think
didn't
there's
even live in Columbus, Ohio. All of those moves, Columbus was never there. I ended up in Columbus by accident, because my boyfriend said at the time, he was like, "It only costs $10 to apply to Ohio State. Why don't you do that as a practice application?" I was going to BU, thank you very much. They
oh
called me in June of my senior year. They were like, "How are you planning on paying for this?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" Honestly, I thought if you get accepted into a school, they'll help you put together a financial aid package, and so then you go to the school. Nope. They were like, "That is not how it works." I
no.
was like, huh. I'm so good at asking for help
Right at 19. And so it was
well, then I
literally,
was 17. Yeah,
but that, like, it was all meant to be.
mhm. Yeah.
Okay, so you go back into the rooms and you're like, all right, I'm here in May of 1996
Not
and
staying.
not staying, and you've stayed ever since.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you've gone, but you've dealt with life, which is sometimes hard for us. And I hear people go out because this happened or that happened or this happened or that happened.
Hmm.
And you went through like the first thing, which we were talking about in the beginning, which is a husband leaving you and not telling you why, which leaves this so self-deprecation, like bring it on. It's all about me. You mentioned rabbit holes in your book a lot. You're like, I was going to go down this rabbit hole. And you were living in Qatar at the time.
Hmm. Yeah, right at
And
at the beginning of that book, I'm in Qatar.
yeah, and you're
Then
in
I
Qatar
moved to
to
India.
India. Yeah, then you moved to India. But when you were there in Qatar, you were together in Qatar, right?
Oh yeah.
Correct?
Hmm.
Yeah. And
I took a job there to help his career, I
right,
thought.
right. And then, and he says this to you, and you go
Over
to
the
India
phone. He
over
wasn't
the phone.
there when he
Right,
said it.
right. Did you ever talk to him again?
One time he like granted me this hour-long meeting when he came to pick up his dog. So I had never had dogs really before I met him, and then he brought his dogs into the relationship. And when he left Qatar, he did not take the dogs with him. And yeah, so I traveled a lot for work, and in Qatar, dogs are considered haram or forbidden according to the Quran. And I think there's, well, I know because I went back for the Tribeca Film Festival when I was the marketing director for that. Um, it's a better situation for dogs, but I mean it was, you couldn't find like pet sitters. There was one vet, dogs found wandering the street were as liable to be shot on sight as like rounded up and taken to the pound. It was a sport to kind of torture dogs. Yeah, it wasn't a friendly place. I mean, the long story, the longer, I'll make it quick. We didn't take the dogs initially because I was worried about them for a number of reasons. I mean, I thought just the travel alone could kill them. They were like 12 and 17 when we went over there, and then, or 15. And then, they also like to run off. He hadn't really trained them. And so I was just worried about doing it. But then I was so miserable without them that we brought them, and then he left. And so but I didn't have a way to take care of the dogs when I wasn't there. There's not like this
Right.
thing.
Like you're not going to be calling like Rover on your phone and going, come over.
Well, Rover didn't even exist
I
then,
know, I
right?
know. I'm teasing. In 1990. Was this
But
19?
also, well, no, this was 2004. This was
Okay.
in 2005.
Okay.
2005. Anyway, so I did, well, no, actually it was 2006. It all, because he left in Valentine's Day, around then of 2006. And then I organized a trip there. I mean, let's be real. What I really wanted was to force him to see me. So I took the dogs with me. And I was like, deal with the dogs. So anyway, that's when we saw each other, and he basically said, well, I just didn't feel like being married anymore. I was like, what?
So crazy. Have you talked to him? Here we are like 17 years later, almost 18 years later. Have you talked to him ever again?
No, the last communication that I had with him was, it's in the book. It's when he sends me this
Oh, yes.
incredibly
Yes.
blasé
Yeah.
email
Yeah.
that basically outlines how he's living. I can't remember why I had reached out. Oh, to tell him about the book. I was
Yeah.
like, "Hey, I have a book coming out. You're in it." I was thinking he would like lose his little mind. I have to see it. What are you talking about? That kind of a thing. I mean, although we had talked a lot about both of us going there and writing books. We were going to be like Geraldine Brooks and Tony Horowitz. I don't know if you know who they are, but they're these journalists. Both of them, I think, have won Pulitzer Prizes. And they had lived together and written about living in the Middle East together. And I was like, that'll be us. And that wasn't how it worked out. When I got that email from him, he basically said, I'm living this life. We've adopted a child. This is what we da, 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 da. And it was clear that he had no idea how, like, every word was like a knife to my heart. Now, no, nor should he. At that point, we'd probably been divorced longer than we had been married. But still, I had just not fully recovered from that still. And it crushed me, and we have not communicated since then. I
Yeah, I
have
just
not had
wondered if
any
you had,
communication.
after the second book, if he had by chance like popped up at all. Okay, so then
Not
you
yet.
go, okay, one of my favorite parts is that you went to yoga. You went to go do yoga in India
Yes.
and you were a smoker. I love that you carried around your carton of cigarettes with you, and you just carried them around the Dunhills. They were
Is
carton of
that not
Dunhills,
so
and you would like,
alcoholic?
and you talk about smelling.
Smelling them. I can still smell it if I think about it long enough. I'm like, yes. It's amazing how much I loved smoking and now how much it grosses me out. But I could still, I mean, there, but for the grace of God go I. The reason I just don't, I can't even entertain it uh, is because I don't know if I have another quit of cigarettes
Yeah,
in me.
it's hard.
Have you ever smoked?
Mm.
Do
Yeah,
you still smoke or have you quit?
I quit 87 times, 87 billion times.
It
It's
takes so
my,
many
it's,
times.
my one thing is that I find about it is that I love that it relaxes me. I know that sounds totally fucked up, excuse my French, but
No,
it
I get it.
totally, it's like the one thing I go outside
Total body number.
and you're
Yeah.
like, ah,
Head to toe.
and it's just the one thing. And if it didn't kill me, I'd do it every minute. I love it.
Mm.
But that's why, because I smoked on hills sometimes.
Aren't they
And so
great?
when you talked about that in the book, I was like, oh, look at her go. She's like, she gets there. I'm like, maybe I need to go to do yoga in India and get away my cravings.
Listen, I had tried to quit many, many times, like patches, pills, gums.
Never
And
done any of those
sometimes
though. Okay.
you've never done any of those?
Mm-mm.
Oh, you know what my favorite was Zyban. Do you remember Zyban?
Yes, yes, yes.
Zyban was like being, for me, it felt like being on cocaine. I loved it so much. I quit smoking. It totally worked. I also quit eating. I quit sleeping. I was getting everything done. I was like, this is great. And then I realized like I'm taking a pill and I'm feeling like I'm on cocaine. And I just felt like this is a slippery slope. Like for me, anything that feels like a slippery slope, it's like, nope, I can't do it, you know?
Well, it's so funny. I watched this comedian the other day, and she was talking about how she goes to work, and there's a woman in her office who still smokes, and all the young people are like, "Ew, disgusting!" And then this girl was like, "Do you understand? She used to smoke in the office,
Right.
in your face."
Right.
And then she was talking about how she loves lean cuisines, and she has chicken tetrazzini, and she's like, "Nobody, these young people don't know what a lean cuisine is or chicken tetrazzini."
Oh my
I mean,
God.
God, it just totally dates us. But so you go there and you become this like total yogi. Then you went to the silent retreat, which I was like feeling so bad for you as you're watching. You described standing there and the person, oh my gosh, and the building that's going on behind in the background, and you're like jackhammers, and you're
Oh
like,
my
and I'm
God.
supposed to sit.
I'm supposed to sit here and be quiet while that's going on. Listen, I think that prepared me better for anything than anything else. But I do want to say, just because we didn't say it, maybe I don't know, is it a spoiler alert? I don't think so. Like going to India, I quit smoking. And it was by not trying. I did not try. And this is part of what set off the frenzy. I was like, "Oh my God, if just landing here could rid me of this thing that I've tried every way to quit for years, well, what else could happen, especially if I applied myself just a little bit even." Like I was so certain, like, there's something magic here that's gonna
That's
happen.
what I got from what you said. It was like it literally it went away. It was like and how I mean how it was still wrecked in the cellophane and everything else. So you went on and then you go and you do your meditation, you quit smoking, you never smoke again after that day.
Mm-mm,
No. And
mm-mm.
then what happens?
Well, I went to, like you said, I went to that silent meditation retreat, and the whole time, I mean, like looking back, I was just out of my mind, right? I was bonkers. I was making up all these stories about everybody, and I had this narrative going. I was in so much physical pain, but I was determined that I was going to stay. My biggest fear was that I would lose my mind because that is supposed, I shouldn't say supposedly, but that can be a consequence of sitting in silent meditation, which is, I think, a good reason not to do it in a country where they don't speak English. I never got part of silent meditations, which I found out later because I was doing research for an article, is that you have these sort of one-on-one sessions with the people who are running it, whether it's the person who's playing the tape, because at an insight like a Vipassana meditation retreat, it's always led by this SN Goenka, and he's now dead, it's led by cassette tape. They probably have MP3 players now, but you know what I mean. At the time, it was a boombox, and even then, that was old fashioned. Oh, I don't know if that noise just made it through. This thing is doing something strange.
I do. I hear it. It's
Oh,
better
sorry
now.
about that.
Better, better. Sorry, everybody. Don't stop listening.
I fixed that. So anyway,
The boom box
the
is
tape
going. Yeah.
is going, and I at the end of it though, like about halfway through, I realized that I could. I didn't have to always react to everything that was going on, and it really started. The gateway there was physical pain. I didn't have to react to physical pain, and it would dissipate. It would go away. And you can really do the same thing with emotional pain, although it's a lot harder. And that is began to be what the process was for me. But I still was using it as a way to try to figure out what was wrong with me, which is not what it's meant for. It is meant more strictly just to become less reactive, right? And didn't I didn't really get the memo correctly. And so I kind of proceeded from there to use meditation as another way to beat myself up. I'm not getting this thing. I don't have an inner Buddha. You know, everybody talks about all this bliss that they're getting, and where's my bliss, damn it? It was not coming.
Well, it's so interesting because I did 1 day meditation in
Okay.
Philadelphia through the University of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
I think it was from 10 to 4.
Hmm.
I of course said we were walking. Then had
Oh,
made
they
us
do
do a
walking?
walking part at like the end, and I remember out loud I just screamed shit, and I was like, "Oh wait, I'm not supposed to talk." Oh, wait. And then I was just like, I've never tried to do one again. But I love that you were previously constantly trying to find, and I don't want to give everybody the whole story because you got to go out and buy it, you guys, because it's very entertaining. Is that we all think that like we're gonna find the answer. Like it's gonna
Right.
be like the Wizard of Oz when they're standing in that room and they're like, oh, all I have to do is pull this screen over and there he is. There's the whole problem right there, standing right there behind the computer.
Solved.
It is. It's solved. And how we stay on this journey, no matter what is going on and no matter what our feelings are, because I can tell you, like,
Yes.
staying sober isn't always easy.
Mm. That the thing that needs to just always be at the forefront for me is that idea of sobriety being the most important thing. And one of the things that I recognized after I mean, my relapse was horrific because everything that had happened to me in before I got into recovery happened again, but it just happened faster and harder. And I just, I know that what is in my future is not good at all if I am drinking or using, no matter how tempting it can seem. Because the thing that changes is that we don't have those problems where I don't wake up and think, oh, is this my urine or somebody else's? And where am I? You know, and is my car out there? You know, I don't have that kind of like crisis disaster. It's more like, oh, I hope that barista isn't there today. I was a little nasty yesterday. Do you know what I mean? Those are much smaller problems that are much easier to talk about with people who aren't sober. And then pretty soon, at least if you're me, I'm talking to people who are giving me like not sober advice, not meaning to, but it's like, oh, screw that guy. Just go to the coffee shop down the street. Or do you know what I'm saying? Like those other, and it's so much easier to rationalize non-sober behavior because the consequences aren't as bad, but they snowball. And pretty soon, at least again, if you're me, you can be rationalizing a lot of really non-sober behavior. So I had to make it very simple. Like, is this behavior, thought, action moving me away from recovery or toward recovery? And everything really is one of those two things.
It truly is. It's like, am I getting closer to drink or am I getting further?
Mhm.
It's
And for me, that's God. Because when I relapsed, my first recognition, because I'm building toward it with this thinking, my obsessive compulsive thinking, which is the problem, that was building, building, building. And when I first got high, it was immediate because I got high. I didn't drink. I was like, I'm going to smoke weed because yeah, pot's, who ever had a pot driving accident? Like pot's not really a problem. Pot's natural. There's so much BS that I could tell myself about getting high as opposed to drinking. And as soon as I was high, I felt it. It was like a cut of the umbilical cord. My spiritual connection was gone. And I was like, I'm going to the bar as soon as humanly possible. And so I did. The next day, I went for my first legal drink. And when we are not connecting to the spiritual, and that's what the whole quest was about, it was really trying to connect to the spiritual. But the problem is like I kept putting my brain in there, which is why I titled it Blissful Thinking. I was not, it was not, I mean, it was a heart-centered journey, but I kept moving out of my heart and into my head. Like for me, like just silent meditation was a really punishing way to go. And I turned it into the answer for a very long time because it was so hard for me. I thought, well, surely this is the answer.
And when did you decide to stop?
Well, I wouldn't say that I stopped, but it became okay to do other kinds of meditation. Like I recognize, like I got to try this walking meditation, or this eating meditation, or this mindful meditation, or this mandala. You know, all these other things can't be wrong. Like I had this idea in my head that silent meditation was the pure kind, the correct kind, the right kind. And I think some of that comes from Catholicism. I don't know about you, Busy, but I was, you know, I am I call myself a recovering Catholic. And it's because you get this idea there's like one true God. This is the way that it is. This is what you're told when you're really young. And it sets up this imprint of how you sort of see things. And, you know, the more it feels wrong, the more I think, well, that's probably Catholic.
It's so funny because I also was raised Catholic. My
Okay.
father's Jewish, and
Yeah,
I raised my kids Episcopalian. And you know, I've studied Buddhism, I've studied the Kabbalah. I'm actually in a Kabbalah class as we speak.
interesting.
I think that the black and white thinking isn't just again for addicts. I think it's for everyone right now.
Mhm,
And I think that
mhm,
the more we're being transparent and talking about these things that weren't talked about forever,
mm.
the black and white thinking is what got me in the most trouble because I had to categorize something as being good or bad. It was never
Yeah.
in the middle where the color is, right? I like to live in the color. I'm not wearing a bright color right now, but I normally am. But it was just Thanksgiving, so I'm wearing brown. There you go. But what I find so interesting is that once we get sober, and I've had like sobriety has not been easy the whole time. I mean, I got hooked up with these women and I got into this clique. It was like the fact that I didn't drink is a miracle. I mean, sponsorship that was so bad. You know, we all think
Mm,
that if you go out there and you have one experience, it's going to be great, but it isn't, is it?
no. And I think that's something that never gets talked about is long-term sobriety, like staying sober through the long term for the long haul, because we're not having those crises of early sobriety. It's not like that. The decisions are different, and it can be so easy to get the poor guidance or whatever. And that's, I do believe that is where that connection to the spirit. I mean, I did have a sponsor who would always say the answer is always more spirituality. And that was definitely what I was looking for throughout the course of this book. And I honestly do think that's the only thing that sort of saved me. And enabled me to finally, and again, I wouldn't say that I don't meditate, because I do. Sometimes I do still sit in silent meditation, but it is not my go-to. And I don't think I'm doing something else, I'm doing it wrong. I love to like have a guided meditation. I'm really into yoga nidra. And I just adore anything that's bringing me into that spiritual framework, which, you know, frankly could just be going to a meeting. But um oh, I got on a roll there and I forget where I started.
Well, we started talking about sponsorship and how, you know, you can get people along the way. And while you've been in long-term sobriety, not picking up and all of the things that are brought into life, because it isn't so dramatic as I lost my car, my kids were
Mm,
taken from me. I mean, my kids could have been taken from me, you know, whatever your journey is, it's not that big of a consequence. But because I feel like, and this is a big thing for me these days, is that when
mhm.
you're in the light, you're awake, right? You're
Yes.
awake. You're
Mhm.
awake. I'm awake. Some people
Mhm.
are not awake. That's okay. That's okay. If you're on your journey, you're not awake. It's okay. But if you're awake and you're in the light, so many things tend to open their doors while you're in the light. Now, if you're in the dark and you're in this place where you keep going, and you keep hitting these walls, it's because you keep regurgitating these things that are dark. And we
Mm-hmm.
already went through them. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? We've already gone through all these things, and it's staying no matter what, even
No matter
when it
what.
gets, no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Right. Even when it's not fun or exciting or it feels uncomfortable. And, I have a writing coach who basically, she said something that I think is great recovery advice too, which, putting out a book is agreeing to feel everything. You put a book out there, especially a memoir, you're being extremely vulnerable and open to all kinds of feedback. People will say all kinds of things to you or think that they know you or whatever. It's like, this is a character that was me back in 2014. Like, that's 9 years ago at this point. So I've changed a lot even since then. Um, and agreeing to feel everything is, I think, a great way to look at the invitation of sobriety. I mean, when we I don't I didn't really decide to get sober so much either time, as it was just what happened. But at a certain point you do have to decide. You are saying, yes, this is what I'm going to do. And I do think that agreeing to feel everything is part of it. It is the richest way to live, agreeing to feel everything. And we all have that opportunity every day, or we can like shut out and work against it, seeking too much, whether it's, comfort or discomfort. Anything we can, or at least I can just take it to an extreme, no matter what it is. Like with the silent meditation, I'm like, this is hell on earth. So clearly, I need this punishment, right? this is
It's so
this is my
weird that we
penance.
think that. I know, and we think that, and I'm always writing little notes when you're talking because I don't want to forget things. It's a 55-year-old brain. I'm like, wait, can't
Right.
forget that one.
Right.
So when we make ourselves vulnerable, I mean, when I started doing this podcast, I mean, I used to get hate mail, all this crazy stuff. Like,
Really?
yeah, oh, I've had it all. Yeah, I mean, because when you decide to show the world, this is who I am, okay?
Mm. Hmm.
I'm done trying to be the chameleon because I feel like, especially when I didn't get sober till I was 37.
Mm.
So when you're out there and you're a mom and you're doing all these things and you're trying to fit in socially to the right group and all the rest of it, which I tried to do. I wanted to be, because in high school, hello, I hung out with the preppy people, but I was also in the smoking lounge. I mean, let's just face
Oh, me too. Me too.
it.
Everything was like a little quadrant, and I was a different person depending on what quadrant I was in. Yeah.
Exactly. So when you decide to get sober and you're like, wait a minute, the quadrants aren't fucking working. What am I doing? I'm like, I have to be me, but who the hell am I?
Yes.
And giving yourself that ability to go and figure out who you are. And a lot of us, like I had 3 little kids at the time. It wasn't like I could go to India as much as I wanted to, and I still do. But having that
But I
place,
think that's part of what I realized at the end of it. I was like, I
yeah.
never had to come here in the first
Oh, I know
place.
that's what
None
you
of this
said.
was
Yeah.
about this. Yeah.
No, but
And
it was the journey.
well, yeah. I mean, look, I am very lucky that I was able to do that. I mean, that's one way to look at it, but there's also pain that goes with that. I mean, I had been hoping to have kids with my first husband. That
Yeah.
did not happen. When you go through menopause at 38, oops, especially if, like me, it took you, I didn't get married till I was 35. So,
Right.
I didn't, well, I started menopause at 38, but anyway, I didn't, get, did not get a chance with having kids. So, uh, it's just interesting. There's so many that you can look at things. This is really what I learned from the silent meditation experience that I had. Although it took me a long time to get to this point because I was so obsessed with looking for what was wrong, and it was to ask what I was doing right instead of being focused on all the time, what am I doing wrong? My question became, what am I doing right? And that made a huge difference because that is an invitation for more of that, right? It's sort of when we look at um, what we want, we can look at it from a perspective of our lack or our lack of abundance, or we can look at it as, a great thing to aspire to.
So what is a tool if somebody's out there listening and going, what am I doing right? Do you journal about it? What do you recommend somebody doing so that they can get to the other side instead of being negatively thinking? They can go, oh my gosh, this is what I'm doing right.
Well, honestly, for me, it was literally asking that question. So I had a cognitive behavioral therapist who was fantastic, and she asked me one day, "Listen, you mention a lot when you do something wrong. What about when you do something right?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she she her advice was to start to comment when I did something well. So it was as simple as, "Oh, I remembered to drop off the dry cleaning. Yay, good for me." And doing things like that instead of like, "Oh, I forgot to go to the grocery store again." You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And I even had a sponsor once give me that advice a long time ago. We were talking about I was saying, "Oh God, all I have time to do is go to meetings and go to work and, whatever." And she was like, "You get to go to meetings." And it sounds a little hokey, like turn that frown upside down. But oh my gosh, it's so incredibly powerful. And I actually have a stamp that says, "What if I could look at what's right?" And I stamp that on the cover of my journal. And to put me in that frame, I just use whatever it takes to try to put me in that frame of mind of asking that question. I love a post-it note. I have post-it notes, you know what I mean, all over all over the place. Um, this one I like this one a lot. It says, "Be your future self now."
Ah.
Right?
There's
What are we
so many
waiting for?
tools out there today that can help all of us get through this journey we call life. And you've
Hmm.
gotten through so much. And I know, like, moving I mean, you went from New York City with all your buds and everything after your mom had passed. And your sister, I don't think, thought you were going to do it, or your dad. One of them did not think you were going to go to Florida, did they?
Well, I definitely didn't think I did not plan to move to Florida either,
You were
as you
just
may.
buying a condo. I know
I
you
was
were just, if you were going to buy a condo because it was only
That's
$70,000, your
right.
uncle told you that's your mom's brother, right?
Yes. Yes, which felt like a total message from the grave. But again, at that point, I
I
was
know you
much
said, my
more.
mom's talking to me. My mom's talking to me. She's telling me to do this. I remember you saying that.
Absolutely.
So what
Yes.
happened there? So tell us what happened once you got to when you had this big plan.
So I had part of my book tour with my first book when I was traveling around was, boy, it gets really cold and gets difficult to be in New York in the wintertime, and maybe I want it to have a car again or something. I don't know. What would be a good city to live in? And I was just thinking about it. One of the cities that I was really considering was Chicago, which I love. I love Chicago, and most of my family is there. And I went to Chicago, and I had a great time seeing my relatives and doing all this stuff. But also, there was a cold spell. It was August, and I was expecting it to be at least warm. I had to buy a jacket when I was there, which I still have. I bought it at a thrift store, and it was just this. It felt like, nope, the universe is saying, not that one. I went to California, which was, I had a great time in California, but again, it somehow didn't come together. I'm not sure how everything came together, but Florida seemed to make sense to buy, at least to buy an investment property. And so that was what my plan was. And I bought this condo down here. And en route, went and visited with a psychic.
I saw that. I'm dying to go to that place, by the way. I've never been there, but it is like I have been thinking about going. I've been to Florida for 5 years, and I mean, I've been living here 5 years, and I'm like, when am I going there?
Okay,
I
well, let's
love
go to
that.
St. Augustine together. Because I, I would love that. I love to say I'm like, I don't believe in psychics, but I'll go to them. That's me in a nutshell.
I love that idea. So, okay, so you come in. I remember that did not work out well going to that little town. What is it called?
St. Augustine.
Yeah,
Casadega
Casadega.
is the
Yeah,
place,
yeah.
and it's a spiritual community that's founded by basically snowbirds from New York who were like, this is a lot nicer in the wintertime, and you have to live in Casadega, you have to pass a mediumship exam. So it's the whole town is devoted to psychic energy and that all that entails. And so I knew I was going to be going by there. I had thought about this place before because, like you, I'd heard of it and I was like, I was curious. So I thought, I'm going to stop by on my way to Florida. And I stop in, and this psychic tells me, first of all, probably not a great sign that I Google her and I'm like, open now, okay with pets. And it's like, okay. So Reverend Suzanne was available, and I went to go see her, and she kept wanting to know about my love life, which was driving me nuts because I didn't want to say anything. I wanted to be a mask and see what she told me, and what she, she's really concerned. Like, are you dating anyone? Seeing anyone? Do you have any kids? What's going on? Like, what's going on with your love life? And finally, I was like, listen. I want to move to Florida, and I'm trying to figure out if that's the right thing to do. My mom, and she basically cuts me off. She doesn't let me say my mom just died, and I'm hoping you'll have a message from her. And she was like, if you move to Florida, you'll always be alone. And like, honestly, that would have just killed me. I think a lot of the years between when I left Qatar and all the searching that I was doing, again, because on some level, I still had this belief that having a relationship was some kind of proof that I was okay, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Oh, for sure.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
And she, when she said that, I just thought, lady, I could care less. Like, see you later. You're not helpful. And I got in the car, took the dog, and we came on to Florida, and that was for me when I knew, oh, I finally am better. I
I
had felt like
love
I'd come
that.
through the journey full circle. Because really, what I was worried about was my writing career, not my love life.
Yeah.
Because the love life, it's a nice to have, but there's so many other things, like being comfortable in your own skin. That is the real reward of sobriety, because that is what led me to drink, is that discomfort in my skin, that feeling like, oh God, no, and I don't have that anymore. I definitely don't have that anymore. But I also don't believe that I'm cured of that. I don't think I need a lot of reinforcement. I use all of these tools myself. I'm still like working on having, what's the word I want to use, more spirituality, right? It's still something that I aspire to. I still do all of the same things that I have done, and I look for new ways to enhance my sobriety going on forward rather than detracting from it. And if something feels not sober, I get away from it. I I just, which is, it's especially tough around the holidays, busy. I don't know about your family, but you end up with in-laws who can, don't tell anyone, but
Well, it's all tough. And I think that I love that you talk about searching and searching for that spirituality. And I think that, like, when I went and went to yoga, I went to yoga, I went to get my yoga teacher certification. It wasn't to be
okay.
like a yogi that can stand on her head or do any of those things, because I cannot. It was because I wanted to be in those uncomfortable places that might be really easy for people, like downward facing dog. Just say, oh my gosh, this is not comfortable for this long. And getting closer to God and having that peace. And my last question I want to ask you, which you kind of just answered, was that you're constantly still searching. And I think that that's what we're here to do, don't you?
Absolutely. And I also do believe, I mean, for me anyway, and again, that's sort of the haha of the title, the way to, and there's a lot of sex in that book too. I feel like, I want to be upfront about that with the book, because if you think this is going to be a book about Buddhism, you might be
Yeah.
horrified,
Yeah.
because I end up at a sex cult and enjoying myself. And, and the way for me to realize these things is through the body. So I do think that yoga has been a big part of my healing, which I continue, I'm going to yoga tonight. You know what I mean? The all of these things, they work together for me, and they don't end. It's not, I have to look at it almost like eating food. I never think, well, that meal, you know what? I'm good. I don't need to eat ever again. No, I know I'm going to get hungry again. And spirituality is like that. My sobriety is like that. I have to keep um, uh, fulfilling, I guess, that I don't want to say whole because it doesn't feel like a whole. It doesn't feel like, oh, I'm starving and I've got to put food in, right? That's a whole other kind of addiction. But it feels like something that I'm feeding, something that I'm fostering, something that I'm caretaking. You know, life is so short and we come together in this like glot of atoms, and we're in this solid form for just this brief, but then we're back out there. And isn't that amazing? And I think the more open I can be to not shutting myself off from that experience, whether it's through denying my feelings, using drugs, wanting to, overeat, overshop, all those things, sex. What was it? My sponsor always used to say, it's sex, sugar. She had like five S words, and those are the ways that I can really try to numb myself out, and I don't want to numb myself out from this experience. I don't know about you, but there's not enough of it, right?
Oh my
And
gosh, it's just it is it I mean, I don't think I remember when I was first getting sober, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but when I was first getting sober, I thought, "Oh my god." Again, I was 37. So I've been drinking from 13 to 37, got married, had 3 kids, did all this
that
stuff during my
always blows my
drinking.
mind, honestly, when
Yeah.
people manage to have relationships, because my relationship was with alcohol. Anyway, go
Yeah.
on.
So when I thought, I'm like, this is going to be it. My life's going to be over. I'm going to be so bored. My life is over. And it's been quite the contrary because I keep searching. I keep like peeling the onion, and it doesn't happen right away. It just keeps happening. It's like, and there's times that it's really hard. It's like a wave. Like sometimes you're at the bottom and you're like, I'm never getting up there again. This is so painful. But then you do, and
Hmm.
you go up and then you come back down again. It's just all about learning how to dance in those waves, isn't it?
Yes, or surf on them, as it were. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting because when you get into that mindset, I think that's when you find people that are on that same mindset, and I'm happy to repel. It used to be, I think, that I would not feel comfortable like feeling like, well, my book is for everyone. My book is not for everyone. Not everyone is going to like it, and not everyone is going to like me, and I'm okay with that. And the only way that I can really successfully um, put myself out there is by the more myself I am, the more I attract people who I am on the same wavelength with, if that makes sense. And that's a great thing. It really is, because it's kind of like when you're dating and it's such a struggle and such a struggle. And then you meet someone and it's not a struggle. And it's like, what? Is this actually working? And you know and the more time, the one of the things, from the book, I dated a lot, and I was very much like hiding myself and who I was, but these were things that were a mystery to me. I was not aware that I was doing these things. I just thought this was how things were done. And it was really by actively not wanting to be in a relationship and going to like adult websites and just being like, well, I'm just going to find some people to hook up with. That's when I started to have relationships, because I was completely honest. Because I thought, well, there's no game here. I'm not trying to get anywhere with this thing. So I'm just going to tell them what I think. And it's amazing how well that worked. And those are the kind of lessons that enabled me to have a happy marriage now. Because otherwise, I'd probably still be way too in my head about it all. But
Right.
once you kind of learn that trick, you're like, oh, I don't have to pretend to be anybody, because who I am is going to attract and repel the right people.
Exactly. And
And it's
being
not like
okay with
anybody's
that.
wrong. It's
No.
like, it's more like, oh, this is working,
Yeah.
or this is not working,
Yeah. It's like that square peg and round hole. You're like, it's
Mm.
not working. Let's keep moving. And then there's nothing wrong with it at all. Right. And it's okay to say
Right.
goodbye. And that's
Yeah.
even to friends. I think, there's certain
Yes.
people that come in, friendships that come in and friendships that leave, that you're like, they came in for the time they needed to. And then
Mhm.
bye bye.
That was a very hard one for me. And it's a big part of this book, even though it doesn't, I mean, it, I don't know how noticeable it is to anyone except for me, that part of the story, but the ability to let go of friendships was huge for me because we moved so much. I didn't have long-term friendships until I got sober. And so I was already an adult and I didn't know how to not like try to hold on to every single person well after the expiration date. So that was another kind of relationship learning for me that was part of this whole journey. Um, because I also, the main story that I tell is a friend who let go of me, but I also let go of some very toxic relationships, much to my betterment, because those things seemed so familiar because of the toxic family dynamic, right? And it just was like, well, this is how it should be. It feels bad. I'm home, right? And not by recognizing that it could be different was the first part, and just by being myself, I stopped working with those people. Instead of trying to be like a square peg for their square peg or a square hole, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna be me, and it's probably not gonna work out so well, and it didn't.
Right. And that's okay. And that doesn't
Right.
mean you're bad. And it doesn't mean you're not doing this thing called life right. Correct?
No, I don't think so.
I think it's quite the contrary. It's like once you embrace you, you get to have this life that's beyond your wildest
My
dreams,
wildest dreams.
which in the beginning I thought was bullshit. But now
Oh, totally.
yeah, yeah. And now
Yeah.
today,
I didn't believe that people were actually sober as long as they said. If somebody said to me, "I've been sober for 27 years," I'd be like, "Yeah, and what are you on?"
I mean, I tell my husband, my husband says the same exact thing. He didn't believe anybody. He's like, you have a year. I don't think so, and it's just, it's crazy. It's been so great getting to know you, LL. I'm so
You
excited.
too.
I'm so excited you came on. And you guys, if you're out there, go check out her book. I'm going to have the link for her book. Her everything is going to be in the description. Please reach out and no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you do want to check out different meditation styles, I highly encourage that. You know what? I had a quiz. I don't think that quiz is valid anymore, but I do have it on my website. So I'm going to I
Send
will
it to me
send you a
again.
new link,
Yes,
so that
please
you can
do.
just explore. I had a thing where it was a quiz and you could take it and it would pop up these styles like this might be right for you. But then when you go on my website, it shows you all of the other styles to look at. And so I'll just send you that link.
Cool. That's so exciting. So if you're out there, you can try this new thing if you've never tried meditation, which what for me took a long time, but now I have to do it every day, just like breathe. So thanks again for coming on. And
Thank you,
everybody,
Busy.
thanks for listening. Please subscribe to my channel and please go and check out everything, all the social media and all that. And until next time, everybody, keep getting busy, living sober. Bye-bye, everybody.